Imagining Black Boys. Part 2 discusses the typical behavior patterns observed in Black boys as a group. The behavior development of Black boys and youth deviates from the patterns seen in other groups of children. So anecdotal reports from schools confirmed by multiple research studies show rates of troubling behavior and emotional difficulties that are very high, much higher, again, than other groups of children. These outcomes are puzzling, given the very typical and promising social development that are seen in the early lives of Black boys, particularly as toddlers and in early childhood. These divergent rates appear in middle childhood, clearly, but the differential rates of misbehavior by all children disappear and they come together so that the rates of boys, African American boys, are not different at all than other groups, and sometimes even better. This raises an intriguing possibility that Black boys and youth simply develop at a faster pace than is true for other children who, in time, catch up.
How does this come about? So one of the things that I discovered in looking at the longitudinal studies, sort of meta-analytic studies of children, of American children, that separated out Black boys from other groups, the story is there's an atypical pattern of development, and the first signs of it occur in kindergarten. It's called the kindergarten transition effect. So when they go to preschool, there are sometimes initial difficulties. There's sometimes some problem, but by the end of the kindergarten year, the end of the pre-K, they're just like all the ones who had trouble, kind of worked out and they're adapted to the school. However, by the end of kindergarten, you see a vast difference between Black boys and other groups. So something happens in kindergarten year. Their adaptation to this more structured setting in schools begins to set them on a pattern. I'm not saying that it's the cause, but that's where we see it. Okay, so what typically, if in longitudinal studies of externalizing behaviors, we know that there are high rates from the terrible twos. I used to think that was a myth, but no, it's not. There are and so all kids, they misbehave, they're saying no all the time, they're throwing things down, they're breaking things, they're sticking their fingers in an electric socket, doing all kinds of things. But, and this is all kids, but over time, that pattern of misbehavior decreases as they get to 4 and 5 and 6. That misbehavior, the rates of misbehavior goes down. But not for Black boys. While other groups of children are experiencing a decline in behavior problems, they maintain an increase. So I'm going to show you some data that establishes that point. Look at this is this is based on a meta-analysis of multiple longitudinal studies where they compared Black boys, Black girls, white boys, white girls, and other groups over time from age 2, all the way up to age 12. And what you see is the yellow line are the non-Black kids, everyone else but Black boys. Their rates go down between age 2 and age 12. For Black boys, it's increasing. And oppositional behavior, which is in the red line, increases even more. So we can see something is happening during this period that's causing this deviation in the development. You can see it again here in impulsivity. Again, impulsivity the yellow line for non-black boys compared to levels for black boys between ages 2 and 11. But the struggles are not only with behavior problems, it's also with emotional issues. And those are actually less well appreciated. We see, the behavior problems we see, the internalizing problems we often don't see. But it is as much an issue for young black boys as for other groups. So in studies based on the National Health Interview Survey, when I looked at different cohorts, that you saw increases from 4 to 12. They had more difficulty with emotion regulation. Now this isn't so that the young boys having more difficulty with emotion regulation than girls. So it kind of reverses once they become adolescents. Girls have more difficulty with internalizing issues, but young black boys have more difficulty than black girls and white children with internalizing problems. And we know, there's some not recent, over the past 10 years, there's been a lot of attention to the increasing rate of suicide among black children. And it's particularly black boys, and particularly younger black boys, comparatively speaking. So, the data are dramatic. So I don't want to say that there are more black boys, just loads of killing themselves, but it's the comparative rate that I want to draw your attention to. I'm going to show you some data. Let's see. Okay, so before I do that, so one of the things we did was a statistical procedure, latent, sort of to identify latent groups. So we took all of the black boys in this national sample, American sample, and we told the computer program, separate them into distinct groups. So we see, are they distinct, are they all the same, or are they different? And so what we found in the yellow line, there are a group of boys who had low rates of internal, and they stayed low between kindergarten and 5th grade. There was another group that was higher, but they were stable. But then there's a third group represented by the red line where it rose significantly. So there's a subset of black boys where their rates of internalizing problems increase greatly. Now, in time, so you may be asking, well, what portion does that? They're about 15, that red group is about 15% of black boys. So it's not even the majority of them, but it's that 15% that's experiencing a range of difficulties that seem to be increasing from when they're little to up to 5th grade. Now, these are data on suicide rates. So this middle line, let me see. Can you see a pointer? No? Yeah. I lost the pointer. But that line in the middle, the darker line that says 0, that's the comparison. That's the rates for white boys. And so the dots that are the rates for black boys. And so what it's showing that ages 5 to 9, 10, 11, and 12, the rates of suicide are higher for black boys than for white boys. But then when you get to 14 to 17, it's lower. So that's an interesting. So there's something then about this middle childhood that's problematic for black boys. It stands out, like all through my life, I've been trying to avoid middle school black boys because they're tough. But everywhere I go, if I go to consult with schools, if I teach religious education at churches, they want me with the middle school boys. And now I know why. That they're very challenging and they're experiencing a lot of issues. So let me show you some more suicide data. So these are the actual numbers. So you can see I think these are rates per 100. So it's not a lot, 5 to 9, It's 0.88, but it's still higher than white boys. At age 10, it's 8.24 versus 2.78, higher for black boys by age 10, still higher at 11, still higher at 12, about the same at 13. So by the time they get into high school, they're pretty close to the same. And then the rates of whites increase over that. And so I think all these data for me are pretty convincing that there's something special about that's happening in middle childhood that helps to explain this puzzle about why it is that so many later on in life, so many black boys are experiencing adverse outcomes. So what are the takeaways? There's increasing difficulties in young boys as they go from around age to 13 in behavior, depressive symptoms, suicide, peer relationships, and poor academic performance. I have data, I've done some analyses. I was given a gift. The school data on every child in the school for the past 8 years, from pre-K up to 12th grade. So it's a universal sample. And what do I see when I look at that? When I look at the black boys, their scores in the early grades are not that different. Their rates at which they pass classes, pass state tests, they're about the same in elementary school. But once you hit 6th grade, it drops like a rock. So I think maybe we ought to get rid of middle school. We ought to get rid of middle age, like middle childhood. Let's just snatch that out and let them jump to adolescence. But there's a cumulative